What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to C2M Sports. Today's video will be the May edition of MLB Monthly Review. For those of you who don't know, the way this works is that I evaluate every team's performance every month, give a letter grade based on their performance during that month, and briefly discuss what each team is doing well and what they may need improvements on. Some factors in my evaluation will be expectations versus reality, statistics, the eye test, and of course their record. And today I will be evaluating every team's performance from the month of May. If you're new, be sure to hit that subscribe button down below, make sure to leave a like on the video to help the channel grow, and comment down below how your favorite team did this month. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get started with the review. Just like the previous video, I'll be putting timestamps for each MLB team in the pinned comment down below if you want to know when I'll be talking about your favorite team or any teams you may be interested in. And as I always do, I will start with the American League East, starting with the Baltimore Orioles. So in the month of May, the Orioles went 14-16, and now their overall record is 21-30. I'm going to go ahead and give the Orioles a C- here. Definitely a better month compared to last month for the Orioles. The Orioles are scoring a lot more runs than they did last month. They're starting to hit the ball a lot better, and more importantly, guys are getting on base. Mancini, Santander, and Hayes all have an on-base percentage above 300, but the pitching, especially the starting rotation, is what's killing this team. The effects of having John Means out for the season are really starting to show, and having to face great lineups in the AL East does not help either. So overall, offense, good. Pitching, not really. Moving on now to the Boston Red Sox. The Red Sox went 14-14 in the month of May, and their overall record is now 23-27. And in all honesty, I'm gonna have to give the Red Sox a C here. The Red Sox are really falling short of expectations right now. This is a team that should be in the mix for a division title or even a wild card spot, but right now they aren't. However, it's still early and things could turn around for the Red Sox. But with this pitching, their chances just aren't looking that great. Just way too many runs being given up. But on the bright side for the Red Sox, they are scoring runs. Devers, Bogarts, and JD Martinez are all hot right now. And Trevor Story, he's starting to come around. He's starting to heat up a bit as well. But like I said before, the pitching is going to have to step it up if they want to compete. Moving on now to the New York Yankees. The Yankees went 19-9 in May, and their overall record is now 34-15. Guys, like, I'm trying not to sound like a homer here, but I gotta give the Yankees an A+ again. The Yankees are just exceeding all of my expectations right now. I mean, what can I say right now that's really bad about the Yankees? I can't really say anything. The starting rotation has been unbelievable. Garrett Cole starting to heat up too, and that's just the cherry on top for this team. The bullpen is fantastic. Michael King and Clay Holmes are just absolute beasts. The Yankees are scoring a lot of runs as well. Aaron Judge is looking like the AL MVP frontrunner. Gleyber Torres is starting to look like his old self again. Rizzo's playing well, and Jose Trevino is starting to look like the true starting catcher for this team. He's playing phenomenal, offensively and defensively. Everything is going right for the Yankees right now, and they are currently the team to beat in the American League. Moving on now to the Tampa Bay Rays. The Rays went 16-12 in May, and their overall record is now 28-21. I'm gonna give the Rays a B here. The Rays are just playing pretty decent baseball right now, and they did get off to a hot start this month with a 6-game winning streak. Starting with the offense, the team's hitting the ball well. Margot, Franco, and Rosarena are all playing very well offensively, and the pitching's been pretty good as well this month. McClanahan's already looking like the true ace of this team. But the thing is, the Rays on paper are not playing outstanding baseball. They're playing good baseball, don't get me wrong. They're not giving up a lot of runs, but they're not scoring a lot of runs either. Right now, they're just playing typical Rays baseball where they play all of their players. Each player does his job well, and they win games. As of May 31st, they are 6 games back in the division and are definitely in the hunt in the AL East, with it being so early in the season still. Moving on now to the Toronto Blue Jays. The Blue Jays went 14-12 in May, and their overall record is now 28-20. I'm gonna give the Blue Jays a B- here. The Blue Jays had a weird first half of May. and a great end to the month with a 6-game winning streak. The bats are starting to wake up again in Toronto after a really slow first half of the month. Vladdy Jr. is playing very well, Bo Bichette is back to playing well, and Springer's hitting the ball well too. But I think we all know that the pitching is just carrying this team right now. Manoah and Gosman are just putting the rotation on their backs right now, and the bullpen is pitching well too. With the Blue Jays heating up, it's gonna make for an interesting June for the AL East, so keep your eye out for that. Alright, so now moving on to the AL Central. Starting with the Chicago White Sox. The White Sox went 15-12 in May and are 23-24 overall. I'm gonna have to give the White Sox a C+ here. The White Sox are just a frustrating team to watch sometimes. They started off hot this month, but once again, things are really starting to cool down. On paper, it looks like they're playing better baseball, but I'm still seeing the same mediocre performance that I saw last month. The White Sox are having a tough time scoring runs, and Eloy Jimenez being injured might be playing a part in that. And now with Tim Anderson out, things are just not looking good for the White Sox. The starting rotation's performing okay. Right now, it looks like the only guys that are performing well are Michael Kopech and Dylan Cease. And in the bullpen, Liam Hendriks is pitching well, but the real elephant in the room is that Tony La Russa is facing a lot of pressure from White Sox fans. And honestly, I don't blame them, because there were some questionable decisions made on the field, as well as just the team performing poorly in general. Now, if you want my opinion, I think that Tony La Russa is not going to get fired because the owner thinks so highly of him. Really tough month for the White Sox right now, but they might turn it around. They have a very talented roster, and we all know that they are capable of performing at a very high level. Moving on now to the Cleveland Guardians. The Guardians went 12-12 in May, and they are now 21-24 overall. I'm going to give the Guardians a C-. Cleveland is just a very inconsistent team, but something tells me that they have the potential to be good this summer. They don't lose games by a lot of runs, and we know that they have the potential to score a lot of runs. We didn't really see it too much this month, but going back to April, the Guardians were scoring a lot of runs. Jose Ramirez is having an incredible season right now. Andres Gimenez has now become one of the most underrated players in the game right now, and he's playing very well. And I like that Josh Naylor is adding some fire into this team, and the pitching is starting to come around too. Shane Bieber has been pretty dominant this month, and the bullpen is performing well too. I really think that Cleveland can perform in this division considering how weak it is, and especially right now they can take advantage of that with a pretty easy first half of June coming up for them. Moving on now to the Detroit Tigers. The Tigers went 12-17 in May, and overall they're 19-30. I gotta give the Tigers a D- here. The Tigers just cannot seem to score runs right now. Baez, Scope, and Torkelson, and I can name many others. They are just non-existent right now. The fact that a 39-year-old Miguel Cabrera is leading the team in batting average, hits, and RBIs is really saying something. And the pitching has been very disappointing as well. The starting rotation has not pitched all that well, and Casey Mize being out for the season really hurts this team. But as of right now, Skubal is looking like that go-to guy in their rotation. The bullpen hasn't pitched well either. Overall, these first couple of months have been a bit rough for the Tigers, to say the least, and it's really not looking any better with the injuries and the poor performances from the star players. Moving on now to the Kansas City Royals. The Royals went 9-20 in May and are 16-32 overall. I think you guys know what that means. I'm gonna have to give my first F here to the Kansas City Royals. Man, it has been a rough month for the Royals, but that's mostly because pitching has just been non-existent. Just so many runs and hits being given up, especially from that starting rotation. But the thing is, the Royals have good offensive players on their team. Salvi's been hitting some bombs, Bobby Wood Jr. starting to perform pretty well at the plate, and Benintendi and Taylor are getting on base a lot. There have been some games this month where the Royals are scoring 5, 6, and 7 runs, but they lose these high scoring games just because of how many runs they give up. Really tough month for the Royals, and I don't really expect it to get any better for them. Moving on now to the AL West, starting with the Houston Astros. The Astros went 21-8 in May and are 32-18 overall. The Astros are getting an A+. What a month for Houston. Bouncing back after a slow start in April. This team is really clicking on offense right now, and they are easily one of the scarier lineups in the league. Yordan Alvarez is on an absolute tear right now. Altuve is playing well, and Jeremy Pena, even though he's starting to kind of come back down to earth a little bit, he's still playing some very good baseball. And Kyle Tucker is also having a pretty solid season. The pitching has definitely been a lot better this month. Verlander, Valdez, and Javier are all pitching very well. Right now, guys, Houston is the clear front runner in the AL West and are definitely one of the top teams in the league. Moving on now to the LA Angels. The Angels went 13-15 in May and are now 27-23 overall. I'm gonna have to give the Angels a C- here. It looks like the Angels are starting to come back down to earth. Just a very inconsistent month of baseball, followed by a 6-game losing streak to end the month. But the thing is, in typical Angels fashion, the offense doesn't really seem to be the problem here. Mike Trout is back in that MVP race once again. Ohtani is hitting the ball well, Jared Walsh is playing well, and Taylor Ward is still hitting it pretty decently, but it's looking like he's slowing down a bit too. The pitching, on the other hand, as I said, in typical Angels fashion, is definitely the issue here. The bullpen cannot seem to hold a lead, and even the starting rotation is struggling a bit. Pitching has always been the Achilles heel of this Angels team, and right now it is killing their chances of winning the AL West. Things could turn around, but as of right now, the Angels are just back to being a mediocre team again. Moving on now to the Oakland A's. The A's went 10-21 in May and are now 20-32 overall. I'm gonna have to give the A's an F here. You gotta feel bad for A's fans right now. They had the chance to build something great in Oakland, but they just decided to sell all of their good players this offseason, and the effects are really showing. Nothing right now is going right for Oakland. They're not scoring any runs, and they're giving up a lot of them. At least pitchers like Blackburn and Puck are pitching well, but that's really all in terms of the A's pitching. Yeah, right now I feel really bad for A's fans. It's kind of sad to watch their games on TV just because nobody shows up to the stadium and they just don't have a good team. Moving on now to the Seattle Mariners. The Mariners went 10-18 in May and are 21-28 overall. I'm gonna have to give the Mariners a D here. Just a rocky month for the Mariners in general. A really bad start to the month and an okay finish. In the first half, the Mariners offense was pretty non-existent, but now they're starting to heat up again. Ty France is on a tear right now. It looks like Julio Rodriguez is starting to live up to the hype, and JP Crawford has been playing pretty solid this month. The pitching, on the other hand, has really been holding this team back, especially the bullpen. The Mariners gave up 131 runs this month, which is quite a lot. If the pitching, especially the bullpen, can turn it around, this team can contend for a wildcard spot down the road. And moving on now to the Texas Rangers. The Rangers went 17-10 in May and are 24-24 overall. I gotta give the Rangers an A here. What a turnaround for this Rangers team. Last month, things were looking a bit rough. Their star players just couldn't hit, and the pitching was pretty rough, not gonna lie. But now this team is starting to score runs. Seager and Garcia are starting to heat up. The bullpen's getting better, but the starting rotation is being heavily carried by Martin Perez right now. It seems like the Rangers are winning games because their offense has been fantastic, and they're winning because Martin Perez has had some fantastic starts on the bump. If the Rangers want to contend in this division and compete with the Astros, the pitching is going to have to step it up. But the offense right now has been unbelievable. Definitely a great month and a complete 180 for the Rangers. Alright, so that'll do it for the American League. Moving on now to the National League, starting with the NL East. Kicking things off with the Atlanta Braves. The Braves went 13-15 in May and are 23-27 overall. I'm gonna have to give the Braves a D+ here. Such a disappointing month for the Braves once again. I'm giving them a D+ because this team is just way too inconsistent, and it's frustrating to watch knowing how good this team really is. I mean, they're the reigning World Series champs, and they have so much talent on this roster. Some nights this team looks incredibly dangerous, and other nights they just look asleep. On the bright side, Dansby Swanson is starting to heat up. Austin Riley is fantastic at the plate, and Acuna has easily been their best hitter this month. But the rest of the guys have just been very inconsistent. The pitching especially has been probably the most inconsistent part of this team, especially the bullpen. And Kyle Wright and Max Fried have really been carrying this rotation on the front end. Look, the Braves are just way too talented to be performing like this. They need some sort of spark to really fire them up and get them back on track. Moving on now to the Miami Marlins. The Marlins went 7-19 in May and are now 19-27 overall. Man, I really hate to be doing this because they're such a likable team, but I gotta give the Marlins an F here. It's a pretty obvious reason as to why the Marlins haven't been performing well this month. They can't score and they can't hit the ball. It's that simple. It seems that everybody is struggling at the plate right now for the Marlins, except for Jazz Chisholm and Garrett Cooper. And the pitching, besides Alcantara and Lopez, is kind of struggling a bit too. The bullpen hasn't been too special. Definitely a 180 from this Marlins team. There's definitely potential for this Marlins team to be a wild card contender, but the offense needs to step things up and really help out this rotation. Moving on now to the New York Mets. The Mets went 19-10 in May and are now 34-17 overall. I really hate to do this, but I have to give the Mets an A+ here. I will admit that the Mets are starting to convince me that they are for real. This team, just like the Yankees, are on fire right now. All aspects of their team are playing well, especially the offense. Pete Alonso is hitting bombs. Lindor's having a good year, and I will say that the Mets really have one of the most underrated outfields in the league right now. The bullpen's even getting it done. Scherzer's having a great season. I really hate to be giving the Mets all of this praise, but they deserve it. They've been really good up to this point, and it looks like they have the ability to keep this up. Moving on now to the Philadelphia Phillies. The Phillies went 10-18 in May and are now 21-29 overall. I gotta give the Phillies a D- here. The Phillies continue to struggle with the same things. Pitching's been a bit rough, especially the bullpen, and the Phillies continue to showcase some defensive struggles. Offensively, however, the Phillies are pretty good. They score a lot of runs. Guys like Schwarber, Harper, and Hoskins are all performing really well. But as I said before, the pitching and the defense hasn't been all that great. So naturally, they give up a lot of runs. I don't know if the Phillies really have the pitching talent to compete in this division, especially in the bullpen, which is why I really don't see them being wildcard contenders at this point. Moving on now to the Washington Nationals. The Nationals went 11-17 in May and are 18-33 overall. I'm gonna have to give the Nationals a D here. It's just a pretty rough month for the Nationals. Only reason they don't get an F is because they were pretty good offensively this month. A lot of guys in the team are hitting consistently. Juan Soto, of course, Cesar Hernandez, Josh Bell, and Keibert Ruiz, but the pitching is non-existent right now. 154 runs given up this month and 277 runs given up in total, which is the worst in the league. They just don't have the talent in the pitching department to keep up with the division, and I really don't see them leaving last place at this point. Alright, so moving on now to the NL Central, starting with the Chicago Cubs. The Cubs went 12-16 in May and are now 20-29 overall. I'm gonna give the Cubs a D+ here. The Cubs were a pretty streaky team this month. It just seemed like they would win 3 to 4 in a row and then they would lose 3 to 4 in a row. The offense has been pretty decent. Guys like Contreras, Wisdom, and Happ have all had a pretty good year at the plate so far. The pitching, on the other hand, not great. The starters aren't getting it done, and the bullpen, besides David Robertson, is not really getting the job done either. The Cubs are one of those teams that are rebuilding at the moment, so the poor performance really isn't a surprise. They just don't have the talent to compete with the Brewers and the Cardinals right now. Moving on to the Cincinnati Reds. The Reds went 14-13 in May and are now 17-31 overall. Way better month for Cincinnati. I gotta give them a C. Still not that great of a team, but they are improving nonetheless. The bats are awake in Cincinnati right now. They're scoring a lot of runs. 135 runs scored this month, and even a 20-5 win over the Cubs. But the pitching is still very inconsistent. Hunter Green, case in point. Overall, the Reds are improving, and it's really nice to see them winning games again. Moving on to the Milwaukee Brewers. The Brewers went 17-12 in May and are now 32-19 overall. Gotta give the Brewers an A here. The bats for the Brewers this month have been hot, especially at the beginning of the month. Rowdy Tellez has been good. Adames has been good. Renfroe is a stud. You can't sleep on this Brewers offense this year. They have come to play. The pitching has been good, but definitely not the level we're used to seeing them at. The rotation's just been pretty decent, but the bullpen is the part of this team that is really getting it done. I mean, having Devin Williams and Josh Hader on the same same team really helps. The Brewers are definitely a good team, and they've had a great month. Like I said last month, the NL Central is going to come down to either the Brewers or the Cardinals taking it, and I'm really thinking it might even come down to the last few games of the season. So with that in mind, moving on to the St. Louis Cardinals. The Cardinals went 17-12 in May and are now 28-21 overall. I am also giving the Cardinals an A. This Cardinals lineup is so dangerous. They scored 150 runs this month with a lot of blowout wins. Goldschmidt is on an absolute tear right now. Arenado's playing well, and Tommy Edman had a great month too. And now they called up Nolan Gorman, who is off to a great start. The starting rotation's been solid too, with Mikolas and Wainwright leading the way. Really good month for the Cardinals. This is a dangerous team that looks pretty hungry to win. Moving on now to the Pittsburgh Pirates. The Pirates went 12-15 in May and are 21-27 overall. I'm gonna give the Pirates a C- here. Look, the Pirates are winning games, and I really thought they would be a lot worse. They've had some good offensive performances from Chavis, Hayes, and Reynolds, but on paper they haven't really performed all that well offensively, with only 88 runs scored this month. And I will say the pitching for the Pirates has not been good. The starting rotation's been pretty bad, and the bullpen isn't really helping them out either. On paper, the Pirates should be a last place team, but they're winning games. Not a lot, but they're winning games. Alright, so moving on now to the NL West, starting with the Arizona Diamondbacks. The D-backs went 15-14 in May and are now 25-26 overall. I'm going to give the D-backs a C+ here. The D-backs were one of those streaky teams this month, and the main issue with this team is definitely the pitching. Really, the only consistent starter this month was Zach Gallen. He really had a solid month, and the bullpen hasn't been all that great either. But I will say, the offense has been pretty decent. Christian Walker's on a tear. Ketel Marte is back to hitting like his old self, and Peralta and Varsho are having pretty decent seasons so far. So overall, the D-backs pitching has to get better if they even want a chance at a wild card spot. They're starting to cool down, and they happen to be in one of the toughest divisions in the league. Not really a recipe for success. Moving on now to the Colorado Rockies. The Rockies went 10-17 in May and are now 22-26 overall. I'm going to give the Rockies a D- here. I think it's safe to say that the Rockies have really cooled down, but the offense is not the issue here. It is definitely that starting rotation. Just way too many runs being scored on them, but offensively they're pretty good. Although Chris Bryant being out does sting, and Connor Joe is starting to cool down a bit. But I will say that CJ Cron is having a great start to the season, and he's definitely looking like one of the most underrated players right now. The Rockies, in my opinion, just don't have the most talented roster in the league. And just like I said with the D-backs, it's gonna be tough for them to compete in such a tough division. Moving on now to the LA Dodgers. The Dodgers went 20-9 in May and are now 33-16 overall. You already know what I'm gonna say. I'm giving the Dodgers an A+. Just like the Yankees and the Mets, everything is going well for the Dodgers right now. This offense is just incredible. Easily the scariest lineup to face in the league. Mookie Betts is making an early case for NL MVP right now. The starting rotation is one of the best in the league. Top to bottom, that rotation is nasty. And the bullpen is great too. Not much else I can say about the Dodgers. They're just a scary team to face and easily one of the World Series favorites. Moving on now to the San Diego Padres. The Padres went 16-11 in May and are now 30-19 overall. I'm going to give the Padres an A. This Padres team came to play. They're really giving the Dodgers a run for their money right now. They aren't the most impressive team offensively, besides Manny Machado, who is making an early case for the NL MVP, but the pitching, especially the bullpen, has been so good. And Musgrove is pitching very well, leading that rotation. Winning at this rate without Fernando Tatis Jr. is very impressive. The Padres are just exceeding all expectations right now, including mine. And finally, we'll end it with the San Francisco Giants. The Giants went 13-14 in May and are now 27-21 overall. I don't want to end this video on a sour note, but I have to give the Giants a C- here. Streaky month for the Giants. Offensively, they were really good, scoring 140 runs this month. But on the flip side, they gave up 158. The pitching obviously hasn't been great. Cobb and Wood didn't really have their best stuff this month, and the bullpen hasn't been too great either. This Giants team is a strong team. We know what they're capable of. They just need to close out some of these games, and the rotation as a whole needs to step it up. So that'll do it for today's video. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. Be sure to stay tuned every month for these reviews. I like to give my thoughts on every MLB team, and I really like having conversations with you guys in the comments. Once again, if you're new, be sure to hit that subscribe button down below. We're almost at 60 subscribers, so hopefully we can get there soon. Make sure to leave a like on the video to help the channel grow, and comment down below how your favorite team did this month. Take care, everybody.